Hello everybody, and today we continue studying the main ideas of the Cochrane Gambit. And I would like to carry on with the games played in the Latvian Championship in Riga 1989 between the international master Elvis Vitoļņš and Viesturs Meiers, which was played with Cochrane Gambit. E4, E5, Knight F3, Knight F6, Knight takes E5, D6, and here Vitoļņš played Knight F7. So international master from Riga, Elvis Vitoļņš, was one of the greatest attacking players in the last century. He was a quite close friend of Michael Tal, and I know that with the name of Vitoļņš, we could, I would say, connect many ideas which were used by different players like Tal, Shirov, and Shabalov, etc. So Vitoļņš not just played very aggressively, he loved Murphy's style of the game and Anderson's style of the game, with the sacrifices, with the complications, and Knight F7 was a very natural choice of this talented chess player. After King takes F7 and D4, G6, Knight C3, instead of playing Bishop G7, which we studied in our last lecture, Black decided immediately to play King G7. So Black is ready for sit up Bishop E7 and then bring his rook to the game after Rook F8 and hope that Black's king on G7 is placed quite safe. What Elvis is doing in this position, he's not looking for immediate break after F4 and E5. Instead, he's showing that White could follow the quite simple strategy. So White could play even quite calm in this position, completing the development on his king side, making castle, and just start moving step by step pawns in the center. Bishop E2. So instead bringing the bishop to D3 or C4, White is just completing his development with Bishop E2. What is the main point? The main point that, let's say, if Black plays Bishop E7, short castling, and something like Rook E8, F4, and let's say King G8, White is simply completing his development by Bishop E3, and still E4, E5 is very unpleasant. Let's say after Bishop F8, E5, and Knight D7, White could destroy Black's king side after F4, F5, and now we can understand that White not only gaining much better development, but to stop White's attack on the king side extremely difficult. White is ruining all the position. Black's chain on the king side combined only from pawns G6 and H7, and if we get rid of it, Black's king is completely opened. So already here, after White played Bishop E2, Meiers decided immediately to start attacking White's center. D5, E5. This idea already we saw in our previous lecture. White is trying to avoid any trade of the pawns and to keep strong pawn chain in the center. Knight E4. Knight takes E4, D takes E4, and instead trying to win back the pawn on E4, White is simply completing the development. Short castling. This is greatest strategy. No need to think about the material. First of all, think about the development. Knight c6. Black is trying to counterattack white's center. So now in case of d4, d5, white is losing the pawn on e5. But we are not forced. Knight c6, black is trying to counterattack white's center. But white is just simply developing his bishop. Bishop comes to e3. h5. Intending to move the king to h7 and then trying to trade white's dark square bishop after bishop h6. But black is playing too many pawn moves. For white, it's just a pointer to start the actions. f3, intending to open completely the position on the king side, and over the f file continues the strong pressure over the black's king side position. E takes f3, rook takes f3, bishop e6. White is definitely continue. c4. It's already in d4, d5. Black is in panic. He has no pawns in the center. And white's pawn center is completely smashing all black's pieces. So only try for black is to exchange something. Bishop g4, trying to trade some pieces. But white is just playing rook f4, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2. Even after trading some pieces, white's initiative is only increased. Next move is rook f1. At the same time, white is intending to move his center pawn after d4, d5. King h7. d4, d5. Allowing black to capture on e5, but look what would happen. After knight takes e5, bishop d4, black is completely lost. Or rook on h8 is gone, or rook f7, and with the mating thread is coming. Let's say after knight g4, check, king f8, and I don't like to calculate anything, just play queen e6, and black's king is dead. Queen d6, rook g7, very nice checkmate. So in case of the pawn on e5 is untouchable, so black is in critical position already. Game is lost. Queen e8, trying to sacrifice back the knight for a pawn, but white's attack is still continuous already with the material equal after d takes c6, queen takes e5, queen f2, intending bishop d4, so bishop d4 immediately was not possible because e2 queen was unprotected. So queen f2, bishop d4 is coming, as I said, rook d8, so white is taking one more pawn, c takes b7. Now, not only positional huge advantage white has, but also material advantage. c5, trying to avoid bishop d4 threat. Rook f7 check, bishop g5, bishop g7, bishop takes c5, capturing more pawns, queen g5, and simply white is finishing the game. Bishop d4. When we have material advantage, the best strategy is just to trade pieces. Rook g8, bishop take g7, rook take g7, rook take g7, king take g7, and now we are using potential power of the passed pawn, which should be pushed, and after b8 queen, black resigned. In view of rook takes b7, rook takes b8, and queen takes a7, double attack, check, everything finished. The rook on b8 is gone. Black resigned. This great game was played in 1989 between the Latvian, very talented international master Elvis Vitoļņš and Visturs Mester. Today he is grandmaster from Latvia. Okay, I would like to continue with the next game between Bojan Vuković and Radovan Govedarica from the Novak Nikolić Memorial, game which played in 2000, and opening choice by Vuković, Cochrane Gambit. By the way, both players are quite advanced players with the 24 plus rating points, and at the same time, as I said before, even on that level, knight xf7, it's not just adventurous sacrifice, but quite serious try to attack Black's position in the Petrov defense, which becomes quite popular after 1985-84 when Anatoly Karpov started to use it against Garry Kasparov in the World Championship match. d4. As we said before, knight x e4 doesn't work because queen h5, winning a piece. So Black played instead g6 and or bishop e7 played queen e8, trying to use the tactics and destroy White's center. White is just completing his development. Knight c3. Once again, knight takes e4 doesn't work. You would ask, why? Because after queen h5 check, Black has no choice but to play g6, and queen d5 wins back the piece. So that's why it's important to play knight c3, and no need to protect this pawn, let's say after f3. So we need this f pawn for going to f4 and e5, destroying Black's position in the center. g6. So instead, trying to use the back position of the king, White, as we saw before, just completing his development. Bishop comes to d3. Now pawn on e4 is supported, and White is planning just to play short castlings and f4 and e5. Very standard classical plan in the Cochrane Gambit. King g7, short castling, and now Black played knight c6. White is completing his development by bishop e3, and Black played knight b4, intending to trade White bishop on d3. So don't panic, White is not in a hurry. We can allow Black to capture on d3. Why? Because Black is spending too much time and energy for trading just one piece, bishop. But White's pawn center would ruin the Black's position. So instead, pushing pawn immediately after f4, which will be met by knight g4, and White would need to move away his bishop from e3. White is simply making prophylactic move, h3, allowing Black to capture on d3. Knight takes d3, queen takes d3. Not only completing development of all the pieces, but also connecting rooks. So White rook is ready to come into e1, and after f4 and e5, White attack is continuous. For Black, it's extremely difficult to find any serious plan. Rook g8, trying to set king to h8 and the bishop maybe to g7 and then rook to f8. But black, as I said, is wasting so much time that white initiative is now quite easy being developed by e4, e5 move. So white is directly attacking black's position. D takes e5, D takes e5, and it's quite difficult choice now for black. Someone could advise to capture this pawn, but after bishop d4, wow, look at that pinned knight on f6, king on g7. It's almost impossible to stop knight d5. Let's say black could do something like queen a5, but look at that. Knight d5 tactics. Queen takes d5 looks like only move, but white is coming with bishop takes f6 and the queen on d5 is gone. At the same time, knight d5 move prevents black from playing bishop e7 because knight takes e7 wins immediately. So queen takes e5 doesn't work, but in that case black has to play knight g7. White is continue keeping the initiative and attacking by knight d5, looking for new targets in black's position. So at the same time, pawn on c7 is under attack. Knight c5, queen c3, knight e6. Black was sure that position is not that clear. Even after knight f6, white could try winning the exchange. Queen c6, queen takes c6, b takes c6, knight takes g8, king takes g8. Position still quite playable. Black is having two pieces for a rook and 2 pawns, but with a strong blockading knight on e6 and option to lock white's pawns on the king side after h5 and then maybe rook b8 starting the counterattack. Unfortunately, it's only dreams. Why? Because white is coming here with a winning stroke. Which one? You can try to find it. Knight takes pawn, knight takes c7, not with the idea to trade knights, but with the idea to checkmate white black's king after e6. Once again, pawn should be pushed, passed pawn in the center should be pushed, and this pawn is coming with a decisive checkmate threat. So after knight takes c7, black's position is completely destroyed. After queen c6, white is not just winning in the game. Black played queen d7. White just simply captured the rook on a8 with the extra exchange, with no any compensation and 2 extra pawns. Black resigned very soon. So this one more game which showed great potential of white's pawn center and how white's pawn center is helping us to develop the strong initiative and destroying black's position. Once again, black's king is hardly could find a safe place on the board. From f7, black's king tried to go to g7, tried to move somehow out of the center, but even there white quite easily finds the right way to continue his attack, open the center, breaking the center after e4, e5, and the game is finished with a nice combination. And the last game I would like to show you, showing that even in the end game, white's pawn chain could be quite decisive. The last, I would like to show you the game played by Armenian Grandmaster Tigran Nalbandian and Joseph Pearl in Batumi Open Tournament 2003. Which Nalbandian is opened with the Cochrane Gambit. Knight takes e5, d6, knight takes f7, king takes f7, and d4. So what is so interesting about that game? That white even was ready to go to the end game and using quite successfully his pawns construction, pawn center. In that game, instead of playing g6 or queen e8, black decided to choose the standard way, bishop e7, knight c3 and rook f8, planning to take away his king from the center after king g8. This would be quite great for black, but of course white is not accepting this by playing bishop c4 check, so forcing black's king to spend more and more time after bishop e6. Bishop takes e6 and king takes e6. White, as I said before, is just pressing black's position by his pawns. No need to open up it immediately. So first of all, completing the development. f4. White is having 2 pawns for a piece, but bad position of the king. This is great compensation. King f7, queen f3, c6, bishop e3, king g8, g4, one more pawn is coming to the attack. So white is not showing black his plan yet. I mean, we can move our king to the queen side after long castling and continue pushing pawns on the king side. h4, g5, f5, e5. So what black can do against it? It's quite difficult. Position is very, very unpleasant. Despite the fact that white is a piece down, black is having no counterplay at all. So after the long consideration, Joseph Pearl decided to sacrifice the pawn, but to get rid of white's queen, white's powerful, most powerful piece. He played d5, challenging the center, and after e5, knight e4, forcing white to capture on e4 twice. Then black considered that after queen d5, his position would be quite playable. Even white is having just 3 pawns for a piece. This is end game and looks like not so easy for white to use his pawns. Indeed, queen takes d5, so Tigran Nalbandian is accepting the end game. After c takes d5, starting to improve his position step by step. f5, important move, avoiding black blockade after g6. So now g6 will be made by f6. Knight c6. King comes to e2. So the best placement for white's king is of course in the center, because white's king is going to support his pawns. Knight a5. Now they bring rook to the game. Rook f1. Knight c4, and white just protects all his pawns. Bishop c1. But bishop not just protecting pawn on b2, but also supporting h4, g5 and f6. White's decisive attack on the king side. So even with no queens on the board, white's attack on the king side is quite serious and quite difficult for black to stop it. Rook c8. Once again, look at the technique. We are not pushing immediately h4 allowing black, let's say, even to counterattack by sacrificing knight takes e5 and rook takes c2, somehow creating some counter chances. No. c3, avoiding any counterplay. White is having great pawns chain. Black is out of any counterplay. 8 pawns on the board against 5 pawns, but black's minor pieces have no any target. Rook c6. Black is considering maybe to bring the rook to a6, but white already here. g5. Rook e8. It's this second preventing white from pushing f6, because in that case g takes f6, g takes f6 and bishop takes f6, saying that pawn on e5 is pinned. No worry. Rook f3. Just improving position. Bishop d8. h4. This is unbelievable. White is having piece down. Okay, for 3 pieces. For 3 pawns, sorry. But black cannot move. Next move is h5, then g6, and maybe king d3, and then f6. Knight d6. Black is trying to bring his knight to the center, but f6. Time for decisive breakthrough. G takes f6, g takes f6, and knight f7. Trying maybe to sacrifice back the piece. Knight takes e5. Rook g1 check, king h8, and white is avoiding once again all the counterplay. Simply king d3. Now knight takes e5, d takes e5, rook takes e5 doesn't work because f7 and not just f8 queen, no way to stop, but also rook g8 threats. At the same time, black cannot sacrifice his rook after rook takes e5. D takes e5, knight takes e5, king c2, and knight takes f3. Same. After f7, once again, threat is f8 queen and rook g8, so not allowing black even to capture the rook on g1. Black is completely lost. At the same time, after king g3, white is intending to bring the rook to g7, let's say to play rook g7, or to double rooks after rook f to g3. Look at the black's bishop. Cannot move at all. Rook g8 only move. Here funny, white is just trading. Rook g3, rook take g3, rook take g3, bishop b6, rook g7, knight d8, and rook e7. Black resigned. There is no way to stop bishop h6, f7, rook e8 check. I believe that Philidor and especially Cochrane would be very happy watching that game. And once again, white used all ideas which was developed by John Cochrane, the greatest Scottish player. And thanks to his gambit variation, we have now so many nice games played in the pattern of defense by this knight sacrifice, knight takes f7. It was the second lecture of on the Cochrane gambit, and on the last lecture, third lecture, I would like to carry on with famous game between Topalov and Kramnik, when for the first time in the history, in the top chess tournament Linares, this gambit was played. and quite successfully, because Kramnik only escaped by luck from the very unpleasant situation. So, see you next week for the next and the last lecture about the Cochrane gambit. Bye.